Show. I'm Martin Wilshire, host. We have a real special show for you this evening. I have Melanie Kirchdorfer, who was involved in the Berkshires UFO incident back in 1969. And I also have right here in studio, I have another camera for him, is Mike Sisino, who actually saw something earlier before. Well, I'm going to let him explain his story, but it was the same night, the same UFO heading toward the Berkshires. So he's right here. He lives about 20 miles from where I do here in South Carolina in the warm season. So he agreed to show up here in studio. I'm going to have him tell his story. And the blog today, I don't have that title right in front of me, but Charles Lear wrote a nice blog about UFOs in the UK. And check that out on our website, which is podcastufo.com. Thank you for all those who support the show. Thank you all for listening. And without further ado, I'm going to bring in my two guests this evening. Hi, Melanie. Hi, Melanie.
Hi, Martin. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you again. I'm trying to remember, and this is Mike here. Mike, welcome.
Hi, Mike.
Thank you. Hi, Melanie.
Yeah, exciting. And Melanie, it's nice to actually say that both guests I have met in person. It was really nice to meet you at your lovely home in the Berkshires. Was that a couple of years ago? I'm trying to remember when that was.
Almost 3 years, I believe.
Oh, wow.
That long it flew.
It just seems to fly, really fast. Mike and I were talking about that outside a little earlier, how fast time seems to be flying by. But anyway, what I'd like to do is I want to have Mike speak first. And I do want to say this also. At the very end of the show, I pre-recorded a clip with a wonderful writer named Samantha Graves-Brownell. Now, Samantha contacted me, several months ago because she was involved with a police officer in Sheffield. He's no longer with the police department, but so she got interested in this. And as a writer on the outside, she did some great research and interviews, and she will be on a video clip at the tail end of this show. So make sure you stay for that. It's fascinating what she has uncovered in her investigations. So for right now, I'd like to turn it over to you, Mike. I'd like for you to tell your story and how I would really like for you to just kind of tell me what you told me outside, how this all happened for you. It's fascinating.
Sure. I will start right at the very beginning. Labor Day weekend, 1969. I was living on Long Island with my parents. We owned a marina, and we had a house on Smithtown Bay. My mom and I shut the marina down, and we were driving home. Our house was at the end of the point. And as we're driving down the dirt road in our 1946 Willys Jeep with no roof on it, I looked to my right, and coming out of the south was a UFO. I'm going to guesstimate that it was maybe 200 feet off the ground. It was very large and silent. I said to my mom, I said, "Mom, look at that, look at that." So she stopped the Jeep. We looked at it very briefly. It was moving slowly. So after it passed over us, she hustled down to the bluff, and we watched it travel across Long Island Sound in kind of a northwesterly direction. And that was that. My dad was the chief of police. He was on duty that night. When he got home, we mentioned it to him, what we had seen. He acknowledged that they had received a lot of reports of that same craft, if you will. And he kind of he validated what we had seen. And that was the end of that for all intents and purposes. We talked about it in the family. I had a older brother who was also in law enforcement in a different location on Long Island, and they had reports of this same craft. So that was that. I never really talked about it a whole lot. You know, it was a over and done deal and interesting. A couple of years ago, I was at home with my wife. I had to go to bed because I had to get up early the next morning. She stayed up, and when I woke up the next morning and we're eating breakfast, she said to me, she said, "You need to watch this show that I watched last night on Unsolved Mysteries about UFOs." And I went, "Okay." And she said, "No, you really need to watch this show." And again, I said, "Okay." She said, "Mike, you really need to watch this show." "Okay, I promise we'll watch it tonight." Now, I had told her about this incident and had showed her the location that we were at when we saw this UFO. And so that night, I sit down and she pulls it up, and I'm watching the show, and it's all about Great Barrington and all the folks that were involved in what had happened there. And I'm sitting there, and I'm waiting for the mic to drop, and it finally did. The scene where they went into Tom Warner's studio, and he showed them the drawing that he had made of that craft, made me sit right up in my seat. And she knew that it would, because I had described it to her, and what he had drawn was exactly what I had seen so many years before. Having said that, I took my career, and as a investigator, I was able to locate Tom Warner and get his phone number. And I called him up because in the show he had kind of indicated that people had some doubts about the whole thing. And I just wanted to call to tell him, I remember that night, same year, same weekend, same night, I saw what you drew. So,
Yeah.
so we're good to go there.
Yeah,
That's
excellent.
amazing.
Isn't it? I mean, it's just there's and Melanie, you have we'll talk about this a little later. People have reached out to you, but yeah, I mean, and you you mentioned as an investigator, so you what's that? Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, just that you have you know have the skills and whatever, but your whole family was in law enforcement basically, and anyway. I guess we could only speculate that it was the very same UFO heading from somewhere. You said it was coming from the south, so but heading toward overstate. Now,
I'm going to add something to this.
yes, yeah, okay,
After the Unsolved show, I got on my computer on Google Earth, and I pulled up where we lived, and I clearly remember the direction that this thing was heading in. And as I expanded it out, it was right in line with Great Barrington.
Wow.
Yeah.
wow. And do you remember about what you said? This thing was moving slow, so it's awful hard to tell how long it would take. If that's, I mean, most likely was the same. I mean, how many of those are going to be around, right? Heading toward the direction. Would you? I know you were young then. Any type of guess, or was anyone else guessing an approximate speed?
It was slow. It was very easy to track it. We were able to get back to the house or to the house up on the bluff and see it travel across the sound. And it stayed in our sights for probably close to a minute before it went out of sight.
And what time of the day was it that you saw it?
This was late, very late afternoon. I want to guess it was probably, maybe 7 o'clock at night, somewhere in there. The sun was getting low in the sky. It was a warm day. And, so 7:30 at night, probably.
So that thing was moving. It was moving fast.
Well, the thing of it is that it just seems like this thing could be moving fast. It could be moving, it could float along any speed it wanted to, basically, is what it sounds like. Now, one of the things that when I've heard people describe, what they saw and all that, and I'm going to ask both of you. Now, this is actually from Tom Reed's, what he said, that it was like an absence of sound, like almost like he was underwater. And I just wanted to ask you, first of all, I'm going to pull up a picture of the craft with Tom Warner here in a second, but a picture of what he painted. And this is it right here. So that's, if you can see the image of, that's kind of what you saw, very similar looking thing, is what you're saying, Mike.
Yes, the shape was right on target. I would add that around the outer rim there was lights that seemed to
different
rotate.
color
Different colored lights.
in the
Yes.
middle, like colors that you can't even imagine.
Yes.
Yeah. That's one of the things I have heard a lot of people are trying to say, well, it was a color I've never seen before, which is kind of hard to imagine because, you can think you can mix up the spectrum to about any color. It's just more of a better, closer picture of that. But massive is what you were telling me also, Mike, right?
Yes.
This thing was,
Yeah, it was huge.
and
It was quite large.
yeah. And I know it's awful hard to gauge, but would you say it was a few hundred feet of?
I want to guess it was about 200 feet off the deck. It was pretty close. And, we were able to look at it in detail and really get a good look at the underside of it as it passed overhead.
So Melanie, I'd like for you, now I know people have probably, a lot of people, but there's so many new people coming into this and I always forget to basically say what happened in detail in the Berkshires UFO incident for the newcomer. And so if you wouldn't mind, you can go into it a little bit and then what happened to you, or I can basically, I know it happened September 1st, 1969. It was a very hot day. There was a parade in town and things progressed. I know that you were down by the lake, but if there's anything you can add to the story for the newcomer, if you wouldn't mind, just filling in a little bit of the blanks there.
I was there with my family. We were having ice cream. My dad had backed in to the lake.
Mm-hmm.
And this wasn't a first time event for me. It had happened to me a lot as a child. So for me, I knew when I saw it coming, I was like, oh, I was scared because I had witnessed these phenomenons before. And my mother started screaming when she saw the lights. My father started screaming. And it was like, some swear words were said and a lot of screaming going on. My dad wanted to chase it. And I was like, no, Dad, no, because I was scared. I knew what was coming. And it was like, please don't chase it. Please don't chase it. And my mother's like, Joey, don't do that. And my sister had seen these little gray men before that would come into our room. And I was like, please don't. And then I was levitated out of the car. They don't remember a whole lot of what happened afterwards either. And, my mom for years wouldn't admit any of this to me that had happened. It was like, don't talk about it. You weren't supposed to talk about it. And now a lot of the people that are coming forward, they weren't supposed to talk about it either. And it's like a relief to all these. They're not children anymore. They're my age, or they're younger than me, or they're older than me. They're finally talking about it. Everybody's talking about it. And it's a relief. And some of the tales that I'm hearing, it's like, oh my God, you too? And it's like, wow. And it had been going on with them since they were children on the streets all along the river. And it all took place along the river, the Housatonic River. And it's like, you too? This happened to you too? And none of us could speak about this. But that one particular evening, I was gone from about 7:30 at night, because it was when the sun was going down. Like you said, the sun was going down. And in that time of the year, the sun would go down about 7:30. And I was gone. I remember levitating over Berkshire Heights, and someone from that area also contacted me that had experiences, bizarre experiences his whole childhood. And I remember levitating over there, and I remember seeing all of you can't move when this happens to you. You just cannot move. You're stuck. You can move your eyes. That's it. And then I remember being on this craft. I don't know if it was a craft or whether, because I've always said, Martin, and I know that you have heard me say this too. I don't know whether well, now I know, because everybody's coming forward and saying that they've witnessed it. But I always said, were we in some kind of a big building, or were we in a craft? But there's too many people now that saw me there and claim that it was a craft. We were so young. But I remember being on a table. I remember these glass cubes. I remember this bronze and amber color. And I don't know what they did to me. I remember being in a lot of pain. And then I remember being in a room and holding my stomach, and there were a lot of young people. There were children, small children, up to teenagers. And I've had 3 people, Tom Warner, this woman Marisol, and now another woman named Renee, claim that they remember seeing me there. I don't remember seeing any of them, but they remember seeing me. I've met 2 people. I've met Marisol and Tom. I haven't met Marisol in person yet. I've chatted with her.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't met Renee yet. I look forward to meeting her. Tom, of course, I know. And then I remember waking up on Lake Mansfield. I don't like going there at all. And I was just in horrible, horrible pain. I remember what I was wearing to this day. I had cut off shorts and a lime green sweatshirt with short sleeves, bare feet. And I had to walk home. It wasn't very far. We used to walk that all the time. And I walked home, and my mother's door, the back door was unlocked, my parents' door, and they always locked the door, but it was unlocked. And they were all sleeping. Everybody was sleeping, but my sister was awake. And I remember crawling in bed with her. We had a big brass bed, and I crawled in bed with her. And we were told not to talk about it until my mother called me, like right before this whole film thing was supposed to happen. And she told me I needed to go to the Historical Society and tell them what happened. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You told me this never happened. And she goes, oh, well, it did. We just didn't want people to think that you were crazy. And I'm like, why would you do that to me? And then, it just snowballed from there. And my sister and I always knew that it happened. And my sister, she talks about a time in Connecticut that it happened that I don't remember. She said that the same thing happened in Connecticut one time. We both remember these little gray men coming into our room. She said that they looked like leprechauns or trolls. She said they looked like trolls, which I've heard are very common for people to say they look like trolls, but they were definitely little gray men that would come into our room. And I know other people that live in the Great Barrington area along the river that had the same thing happen to them as well.
Makes you wonder why this, and also just to let you know, Mike, you can ask questions anytime you want also as well, but it makes you wonder why why in one particular area so often. And you'll see at the end of this show when Samantha talks about, how many people have reported things. I mean, it's just kind of bizarre. And then you talk about multiple visitations as if, I mean, this one, for some reason, is the big one. I mean, the one where so many people saw on Labor Day weekend of 1969. And I'm wondering what the difference is with, like when I was talking to Mike outside prior to this show, I said the thing wasn't hiding, was it? And obviously not. It was there in plain sight for everybody to see.
You knew that was the year that they put the moon disc up in July 1969, inviting people.
Oh, yeah.
That was that was in July 1969, and then this happened in September. So who knows?
Yeah,
there a link there?
I never even thought of that connection. Yeah, that gold-plated disc with all the information on it, and where we're located and all that. I think whatever it is out there already knew we were here, though, probably. But maybe they took that as an invitation.
They had been doing it for so long, and at the same time, Berkshire County has General Electric, Sprague Electric. We have all these companies, and we were polluting the river. It was terrible what we were doing to the Housatonic River. It was so bad. You'd look down in it, and it was purple in color from all the pollution in that river. They were like, it looked like when you would see gasoline in a puddle. It was disgusting what we were doing to that river.
Wow. So Mike, was this, besides the, you getting in touch with Tom Warner and that whole situation, is this kind of the end for you, or has anyone ever reached out to you and wanted to talk to you about this incident?
No.
I have a question for Mike. Don't you find it interesting that so many of the police officers in your area took an interest in it, but no one in our area took any interest in it?
Yeah, that is interesting, Melanie. And to follow up a little bit, after I spoke with Tom Warner, I reached out to the police department that my dad was the chief of police of, and I knew the current chief, and I asked him if he would go back through the records and to see if he could find any written notes or reports on this whole thing. And he basically just told me, he said, "I'm too busy to do that." And I said, "Well, could you have a patrolman do it? Could you have your clerk do it?" He goes, No. He said, "We're too busy." So that was kind of unfortunate. I was hoping to get something in that time frame there. And when my dad, when he passed away, he had file cabinets in his house of incidents, because he had a 37-year long career in law enforcement, and virtually anything that he was involved in, he had a file on it. And unfortunately, when he passed away, my brothers threw all that stuff away.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know a woman in West Stockbridge that lived there at the time, and she was a teenager. She remembers it coming across the scanner, the police scanner. So they were notified. They're just covering it up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I wonder now, you'll hear when I talk to Samantha, when the research she did, she said that unless it was, well, I don't want to give away what she said, but basically that they didn't write a lot of things down back then, and which I think is pretty unusual. And maybe it was their, that particular department or something, but, there must have, as far as Melanie, there was a lot of people calling in that particular night.
There were 250 people that were calling, that saw this, and out of 250 people, that people were calling in. They were calling into Tom J and the radio station as well. he had to have called the police department, Tom J. They don't even have Tom J's record, the radio station, the DJ at the radio station. They don't even have that anymore. And then I was telling you, someone that I know has a recording from 1981 to the Egremont Police Department. So they have records. They're just not letting them out.
You know, which is interesting because the federal government, right, has released a lot of information or some information, and they're not denying it now. They just relabeled these things. So it's a little bit surprising that the police aren't saying, yeah, on such and such a date night, we got a bunch of calls and about these strange lights.
You know what I think? I think because it's Berkshire County and they're afraid it will turn into a Roswell, New Mexico. That's what I think.
Would be good for tourism. Look what Roswell.
Well, they don't want it to be
that type of tourism.
Exactly.
Well,
That's what it is. That's what I believe.
Well, speaking of that, along those lines, Mike, have you ever had any ridicule when you've talked about this?
I have not. You know, it was shared amongst the family and a few friends. You know, some friends of mine from school. I shared it with my wife. You know, we returned there, and I explained to her, yeah, this is where we first saw it. This is the direction that it was coming from, and we followed it down to the bluff and across the sound. You know, but nobody has ever said, "No, you're crazy," or you know, you're making it up. I will say the following year, we were coming home. It was in the wintertime, so it was probably the winter of 1970. Coming home from a basketball game, and to the south of where we were, we saw these series of 6 lights in the sky that were moving very erratically and very quickly. And we stopped the car, and my dad said, "Well, it's them again." And again, my older brother was working that night, and he called him up, and he said, "Yeah, we're getting a lot of reports of these strange lights in the sky." Those lights were moving extremely fast, extremely fast.
Interesting. So, Melanie, why don't you kind of go over what's happened? You mentioned Renee, but since the last time that you were on this show, and since the Netflix, you know, when it came out, Unsolved Mysteries, when they came out with the Berkshires episode, I can't remember what exact year was that. That was episode 4, if I remember right. Was that 3 years ago?
I don't even remember what year it was now. To be
know,
honest,
it's like
as much as happened in my life.
2020 maybe, or 2021. I can't really remember.
I think it was 20. I only watched it one time, to be honest with you. Oh gosh, I think it was 2020. But a lot has happened since then. We've got a group because so many people have contacted me since then locally. And we're putting together a group of local people that have had experiences. And the Monument Mountain area is a hot spot. A lot of people that live around there, and a lot of people that I grew up with have come forward and have talked about it. And people around Lake Mansfield too, around that area. One girl has moved back into town, and some of the things that she has said to me about how she got lost in the woods at Lake Mansfield and she couldn't find her way out. And she ran into these people that were in these robes. And she said it was bizarre because they were little kids. They were like 6 and 7 years old, and they couldn't find their way out of the woods. And they wouldn't talk. They wouldn't say anything. They were just in these robes. And she kept asking them questions how to get out of the woods. And she said they wouldn't say anything. And then she just ran to get out of the woods. And finally she found her way out. And so she's part of the group. And then there's another girl that I know I'm not going to mention any names until we all get together, and they're all willing to do podcasts too. Fortunately, I want them to tell their stories though, or tell their events, what happened. It's up to them to tell them. But then there's another woman who was actually at the airport the night of 1969 and saw everything happen, which the airport in Great Barrington is right near where Tom Werner lives. So she watched everything happen as well. And then there's a young man, like I said, well, he's not young anymore. He's younger than me. So yeah, I think of him as young. But he was living on Berkshire Heights, and he had repeated. I mean, his were even worse than what happened to my sister and I. It was constant up on Berkshire Heights, this poor guy. It was horrible. His sister called me and asked me to call him, to reach out to him. And it's just horrible what he went through. I mean, it was awful. He was literally attacked as a child up on Berkshire Heights over and over again, repeatedly. And then she herself had experiences over at Jug Inn in Egremont. Egremont seems to be another hot spot. She no longer lives here, but she communicates with me. And I have a friend that lives over on Cherry Hill. She has photographs, which is very cool. And she has stories, some good stories to tell. It's like, wow. Trying to think, because there's so many that are coming forward. Oh, she's got a friend that we're introducing into the group. We're just making all these arrangements now to get it going. It's hard coordinating because everybody works or they have grandchildren, and just getting everyone together to do this. But we're working on it, and it's going to happen. It's definitely going to happen.
Well, I have to check in with you as things progress. Also, love to see the images of
the photos.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's Patty. She's more than willing to share them, and she's willing to do podcasts as well.
Let me ask you this, Melanie. As a result of these encounters that you've had, have you had any physical ailments or irregularities?
Tons. I have really horrible health issues. My eyes are ruined, totally ruined. People say, oh, she has alien eyes and she blinks all the time. Well, I have my eyes. I had cataract surgery at a really young age. And my eyes, I have dry eye. I can barely see out of my eyes. That's why I don't even bother wear glasses anymore, because I can't see anyways. I get this click, 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 click in my ears all the time. I have no idea what that is. I've had a heart attack, 2 occlusions already at my age. I had them at a very young age.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think you opened a Pandora's box by asking.
Yeah.
You don't want to know. You don't even want to know.
Nellie, though, I have witnessed, because you sent me something, you also have this strange thing that happens around electronics.
I've been struck by lightning 3 times and survived it. Somebody's up there for me, let me tell you.
But also, like, you were standing next to a light and the light started flashing, and
oh yeah, that happens all the time. That's not new. That happens all the time. I mean, I shut computers down. That's why I don't usually use computers. I've done podcasts before where we think we've got this. We did it. We got through the podcast, and it will be the best equipment that these people are using. Then I'll get a phone call back. We got to do it all over again because nothing's on it. It's completely blank. I've had people come to my house to do filming, and they'll be like, the batteries are all worn out. The batteries are all dead. They'll put a new battery in and I'll drain the battery. But it's usually during, believe it or not, it's usually during a full moon, and we're in a full moon right now. It's usually during a full moon or a new moon that it will happen. Very bizarre things. But I also have, it doesn't bother me. The paranormal doesn't bother me with entities and ghosts. I have no problem with that because I pick up ghosts and entities wherever I go. But the little gray men, that's what scares me the most, because I have had such bad experiences with them. Other people think that, oh, this is wonderful. It's a wonderful cosmic experience. I did not have good experiences with it. So far with paranormal ghost experience, knock on wood, I have not had bad experiences. And I see ghosts all the time. My grandchildren do. My son does. So that I don't have a problem with the paranormal, that part of the paranormal. It's the ET part that scares me.
Let me
And
ask
I've
you.
had several.
Yeah, I
Many.
guess I want to ask you this. What on earth do you think whatever it is, whoever it is, wants?
I think we were talking about this earlier. I've done a lot of research and trying to figure it all out since I was young. I've been doing this, and it's funny because I said this to Henry ever since I've known my husband and I was young. And my grandmother, she lived like right on the river. I lived very, very close to the river, but my grandmother was right on the river where the dam was and everything. We had to go across the street and then the river bank was, but my grandmother was like really right there. And I mean, you had to cross the road, but it was really right there. And I always had this feeling with these little men. It was weird. And then I started researching, and I had this feeling of, I started studying about King Philip's War. And I kept saying, there's a link. There's a link here. There's so much blood that has been shed here with King Philip's War. And you know, the indigenous people are so linked with the star people. And we're killing our earth. We're just destroying our earth. And we're not taking care of it. And I really felt that there's a link. And then about 2 months ago, I came across these documentaries about the Bridgewater Triangle. And I started watching it and watched it with Henry. And he goes, wow, you called this. You called this. Years ago, I called it. That triangle is much larger. It goes all the way into Massachusetts, from Massachusetts into Hudson Valley, into Connecticut. Do you know the last skirmish for the King Philip's War took place right on the Housatonic River on Bridge Street? Right there. It was the largest war that ever took place. It was bigger than the Civil War. More people died in that war on American soil. I mean, it's saturated with blood. So what do you expect? I mean, and they are so spiritual with the star people. They're trying to tell us something. They're definitely trying to tell us something. And then you wonder why we have such paranormal activity. It has to mean something. I have indigenous friends that will agree with me on this.
Now, would you consider UFOs in the paranormal realm, or do you think that is
definitely? I think they're shapeshifters. And you know, I never used to even believe in the whole Bigfoot thing or any of that. But then I started thinking about all of it, because they claim that even in October Mountain and Beartown Mountain, people see them up there too. And they claim that it's all shape-shifting. All of it is shape-shifting, and it's all linked. And the indigenous people, they used to see them all the time, and they would stay away from them, but they would respect it. They would totally respect it.
We actually have Tom Warner on the line, wants to say hi to us. Tom, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks. I want to say you're all having a great show. Hello, Melanie.
Hi, Tom. How you doing?
Hey, Tommy.
I'm doing good. You know, Melanie, I have to confirm your story, because when you had told your story about, you know, these small people and stuff, as time went on, you weren't the only persons that came forward and told me that story. I was amazed, and I was saying to the person, it's confirmation that some of this stuff has taken place, and you know, I personally want to thank you for coming forward, because you know, no one was coming forward. And so the fact that you and Tom and Jane Green, God bless her, and others came forward, it really helped others come forward, like Mary Saul, who called me and recognized me on the UFO, and she recognized you. But there's other people who came forward who recognized you as well. And I just wanted to say that is a definite confirmation. And Mike, thanks for not sending a cruiser out looking for me to get.
Thank you, Tom.
Mike calls me up and I'm up at Lake Champlain, and all of a sudden the state trooper's calling me, and he says, "Well, if I didn't get a hold of you, I was going to call my friends to hunt you down."
Yeah, and Tom, I want to thank you for connecting me to Mike. It is just such a coincidence that he lives 20 minutes away from where I live.
The fact that it went from where he was, and then it was right in direct line for where Marisol was abducted, and everything matched up. And so there's a lot more to this whole story, but it's slow. It comes out. I mean, the fact that it took us over 50 years to talk about it, it's all good. It's a good thing. It advances the thought process on what's out there in the universe, and I think that's terrific. And I want to thank you personally, and Melanie personally, and Mike personally for coming forward, and I appreciate you all very much. All right?
Thank you,
Tom.
Tom.
All right.
Thanks, Tom.
You'll be
Thanks
well.
for the call.
Okay.
Yeah. Bye. Bye. That was good to hear from him. So I have to say, go ahead, Mike.
I got a question for
Yeah.
Melanie.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Your experience in that craft and what it looked like on the inside, does it match what Tom has described it as?
I was in a room, and it's funny because he just remembers. I remember he and I speaking of being in the room with the children, but I don't remember he and I speaking of being in the room with the table, because he was in a separate place that I was in. So we didn't talk about that. We were mainly talking about the room that I was in with him, where all the children were.
Okay.
That's what we discussed. Because the room that I was in alone when I was by myself. And I was in there for a long time. I was in there from like 7:30 at night until 5. I woke up at 5:30 in the morning on the lake. So I was there for a long time.
So Melanie, let me just ask you this. So you're in this room, and first of all, did you think it was the end of everything? Like you're never going home?
You're a child and 12 years old, and you're so scared that you don't think you're going to live. You think you're going to die. I mean, you're trembling. You don't know what to think. Imagine it. And you don't know when you get home, because I had been punished so many times as a child for telling my parents that this was even happening when it would happen at home. So that if you do survive it, that you're going to get in trouble for even talking about it if you do survive it. So you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
And
Imagine.
and then just a couple of other things. Maybe sounding like odd questions, but were there any strange sounds, any strange smells?
Just that click, 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 click.
So that click, click that you have now, you were hearing the click, click then?
It's like you're underwater and somebody's hitting rocks. Like when you're a kid and you're under the water and somebody's hitting rocks.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember that sound.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a question for Melanie. Do you find yourself watching the skies now at night?
No,
any
because
time of
I'm
day?
scared to death
Are you?
of UFOs. Like I said, I'm scared to death of UFOs. Do I go on ghost hunts? Yes, I do go on ghost hunts. They don't scare me. They don't scare me at all. Although I have to tell you, the other night, I heard this weird clicking sound outside at 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay. And I could not figure out for the life of me what was going on outside. And I thought, we've had this bear lately, this young bear. And I thought, oh, and I put these alarms up to keep this bear away. But I kept hearing this weird clicking sound. Couldn't wake my husband up. Couldn't wake the dogs were sleeping. They didn't even hear it. My son, he lives here. He's down at the studio. And I find myself, I'm outside walking around at 2 o'clock in the morning, trying to figure out where this clicking sound is coming from. It's like the rocks being clicked, that sound. And I thought, this is the bear, and the bear is trying to get at the chicken coop or something, but I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't find where it was coming from at all, and I'm in the middle of the woods. Martin knows where I live because he's been here before, and I never figured it out. I have no idea what this clicking sound was. And the alarms were on, so they weren't going off, because I went and bought all these alarms so that this bear wouldn't destroy the chicken. He did destroy the back of the chicken, where I keep my chicken feed. You should see what he did to the back of it, trying to avoid the alarm system, but the alarm would have gone off. I had to get more alarms, so just to be safe. But it was a weird thing. But I'm like, you're getting brave in your old age. Yeah. You get to a certain age and you don't have fear anymore, which is wonderful about old age. That's what I like about it.
Since the two incidences that I saw these crafts, I find myself, I look at the skies all the time, and I see the stars, I see the constellations, I see the northern lights. I've never seen anything in the sky that I can't figure out what it is.
Oh, I've had experiences here after that. In the 90s, there was a bright light around my house. It was completely around my house, and I couldn't wake anybody in the house up. And I don't know what it was, why it happened. And I remember getting under the covers. I couldn't sleep. Nobody in the house. I couldn't wake anybody up that time. I had my exchange students here. And that was really weird. I couldn't wake the animals up that time. And then another time, I was standing in front of the French doors over there, and there was a bright light. It was in my nightgown. It was like pulling me out, and I don't remember. I cannot recall anything that happened that time. And that was in the 90s, but that was the last time. I think I'm too old for them. They don't want me anymore. I'm way too old for them now. They're done with me. They finished with me.
Whatever they were doing, they're done, huh?
Yeah.
Now,
I'm done. I'm all used up.
I don't think so. Let's see. I'm going to invite some of the live listeners, if a person has a good question for either one of our guests here, you're welcome to give a ring. Chanel is standing by, and the phone number is 855-472-5483. That is a KGRA number, and Chanel is standing by if you'd like to ask one of our guests a question. And don't forget to stay tuned for the end of this show, where Samantha Graves-Brownell will talk about her investigation in this area. It's really worth listening to. So, and while we wait to see if anyone would like to call in, I guess I'd have to ask you, Melanie, is there any positive things that have, it sounds like the group getting together might be positive, but has these, I don't want to dare call them adventures because they sound horrifying, but is there anything positive that you've gotten out of whatever has been happening to you?
I've met some wonderful people, really wonderful people through this whole situation. I mean, I met you. I've met really nice people. So I can't complain. And it's confirmed what happened to me, that I'm not crazy. I've had people call me that were very sympathetic about what I'd gone through. I've met the nicest people.
Yeah.
So that's very positive.
Right. That's excellent. So I just got a note. Yes, we only have about 4 more minutes. So if anyone wants to call, you got to call right away. But maybe I waited a little too long to have that message out. But anyway, also you can, if you want to pose a question in the chat, just make sure it's all caps. And I'm not sure if I'm going to get a chance to read through them or not. So if you did want to call in, now's the time to do that. So I'm glad to hear that, there is the positive. There always seems, if you look for it, there's always the positive side. I had Jonathan Wygant on a few weeks ago, a Marine that had an encounter, and his positive thing that he got out of his whole encounter is that he's alive. That's it.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
I love it.
Because, well, I just can't imagine going through what you went through and what these other people have claimed, and then you're looking around, you see other children, you don't know if you're in a craft or a building, and there's probably no sense of movement or anything else. Did you feel threatened?
Of course you feel threatened.
And but did you feel threatened, like intimidated, or is it just the feeling of it?
It's like a nightmare that you're not going to wake up from.
And would you say that was one of the more vivid times that this has happened, or was it?
They were all like that. I mean, my mom would find me, she would say that I would be sleepwalking all the time. It was like when I would come back, she would say I was in her room sleepwalking, but it wasn't because I was sleepwalking. It was because I was traumatized. But she would just be like, Mel, are you okay? Are you okay? And I'd be like, no, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. Help me. And then I would be ridiculed. I mean, they put 5 locks on we had an attic in my bedroom, and my dad literally put 5 locks on that door, the closet door where the attic would go up, thinking that would make me sleep at night, that would make me feel better. Yeah. So I know my dad, my sister and I always say my dad believed us. Otherwise, why would he have done that? Taken the time to put 5 bolt locks on that door if he didn't believe us. So he believed us that this was all happening. But I don't think my mother believed us. She didn't want to, but Dad believed us. So who knows? Maybe it had happened to him when he was a child. And that's why. Yeah.
Do you talk about this, or have you talked about this a lot with your sister?
Oh, all the time. My sister and I talk about it. All the time. In fact, when I met with this man that's taking over for Dr. John Mack. I met with him and I said to him, my sister, what she saw, they're doing research. They're continuing Dr. John Mack's research. And I said, when my sister, she met what she saw, she always describes it, because we used to see them outside all the time, in the trees, even in the daytime. That's how prevalent they were. And I said, Janie used to see them. They looked like trolls, she would describe them. And he said, that's very common, that they shapeshift to look like trolls. And I said, seriously? And he said, yes, people describe them to look like trolls quite often.
Wow, I didn't realize that someone was actually taking over John Mack. That's a conversation I'll have with you after. I'm very interested in that, knowing more about that. But wow. And, I'm still so fascinated by when someone like you and so many others come forward and they all have the same experience and they're talking about similar things. I think I remember Tom Reed saying something about some type of glass wall. I do believe he said something about that. And I think he said the being he remembers having like a football shaped head. Does any of that make any sense to you?
I don't remember seeing anything with a football shaped head, but I do remember the glass wall. But I remember it being, do you remember those 1969 brick type walls that people would see? Yeah. That's what I remember it looking like. very similar to those 1969 glass bricks, because
Yeah.
I recently just saw some of those bricks.
Yeah.
And it brought that memory back. It was like I was flooded back. It scared me when I saw.
Hang on just one second. Saying goodbye to everyone over at KGRA Radio, and we'll be back next week. And who the guest is there, I can't recall, but see you next week. I'll get that before we move on. Well, so yeah, the glass wall, I do remember him, mentioning that. And
Definitely, I saw that for sure. And that's what it reminded me of those 1960 walls that was very prevalent and common that you would see, those thick. So we just did an hour?
Yeah, it's 57 or so minutes in, and it does. It goes by, super fast. So I think what I'd like to do is kind of close the show out and run this video of Samantha, is there anything else you'd like to add? It's always such a pleasure to talk to you, Melanie. I really enjoy very much our, getting to know you a little bit and how pleasant you are and nice to talk with. But is there anything, I'd love to talk to you more, off air, but also I'd like to find out more about this group that you're getting together and whatever, the pictures. I'm really interested in that as well.
Oh, I'm very excited about it. It's just getting like I said, we're all grandparents now and trying to coordinate it all. And Dee Dee just took off to go to Colorado, so I got to get her back. And I spoke to Wendy today, and she's going. I told her, I said, we got some shows coming up. Are you in? And she said, most definitely. So once Dee Dee gets back, and we actually have an invite to go look at some indigenous space that it's an invite that not anybody can just show up at. And I can't even say where it is either. It's private, but I'm looking forward to that. So, and it's local too, and we don't want anybody to know where it is, but it's an invite.
Yeah.
And it's all linked. It's definitely all linked. I can feel it in my heart. I've always said this since I was a child. There's a link there, and I really truly believe it has to do with the pollution and how we're destroying the earth. They're trying to tell us something. Well,
there's a lot of people that claim to have images of that type of thing going on, like the end of the world and the messages of the Ariel school children. A lot of them, had visions when this whole encounter was happening of the earth in a very bad space because of what we're doing, and take care of the planet is the type of message that they seem to get out of it. Whether there's any truth to it, I can't say for sure, but it seems like a lot of people have mentioned something similar to that. So,
and I think because of being a child and not being believed by my parents, that's why I couldn't, and not being able to talk about it. If I had parents that I could discuss it with, I probably at the time would have been able to appreciate it better. As an adult now, and having more people to discuss it with, I can appreciate it more, if that makes sense to you. Because of doing all the research I'm doing. And also having indigenous friends that can explain it to me better too.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much, and thank you, Mike, for being here.
You're welcome, Martin.
We're going to run Samantha, so stay tuned for that. Samantha Graves-Brownell, and next week is Nomar Slevik, and Nomar is a researcher, UFO researcher in a state where I spent a lot of my life, in Maine, and he's actually going to be talking about an encounter that happened in the town that I grew up in, a small town I grew up in. So that'll be here next week. So thank you all, and we're going to run this. And this is the interview I had to pre-record with Samantha. Here it goes. Good night, both Melanie and
Night, Melanie.
Good night. Thank you so much, Martin. Great to see you, and it was nice to meet you, Mike.
Likewise, Melanie.
Take care. If you're ever in the Berkshires, come and see us.
Will do.
right, I'm with writer researcher Samantha Graves-Brownell. Welcome, Samantha.
Thank you for having me, Martin.
So I'd love to hear the story of how you got interested in doing the research on this whole event that happened back in 1969. And actually, you researched even more than that. And so what got you started on that?
On that topic specifically, my partner is a police officer. He was the former sergeant with Sheffield PD. So, it was a topic that I had been interested in sort of privately. And I said, it'd be fun to watch the Netflix documentary about this UFO incident that occurred in 1969. He didn't know anything about it. We sat down, we watched it, and he realized he did know a little bit about it. And there was specifically, an interview with one of the individuals that, and I'm trying not to say too much, but basically there was a connected incident and series of sightings that occurred in the vicinity that started in 1969 and continued for several decades. And when I found out about that, I said, I have to look into this. It was something I had heard nothing about. So I've been researching that specifically.
Ah, okay. All right. And I have to say this because, I've always thought of this as way in the beginning, before Netflix came out, I have to say, as the Reed family incident, the Tom Reed incident. And I just thought that was all that was involved. And I actually interviewed him, I believe, 2 times. And I do believe I did ask him about, were there other witnesses? And I didn't get very far. And then I watched Netflix and I said, holy cow, there's so many people that were involved. And it goes much deeper than that. Through, the guests I had tonight, Mike, that's just amazing how there's other connections too of people that saw something that very particular night, and so many things happen. But I think it's kind of interesting. We've talked a little bit about how the Reed situation, I guess there's some friction there.
Yeah. So, again, my background isn't in ufology. My background is in history, American history. So when I got into this, I knew enough I'm a fan of your podcast. I've listened for many years. So I knew a little bit, but I didn't know Tom Reed. I'd not spoken to Tom Reed. When I visited Sheffield to look into the sightings on this particular property, I was greeted initially with some skepticism. People were a little bit weary of me, and I understood that. I think it's a topic that can generate that. What I came to discover, though, was that the Sheffield Police Department was very welcoming. Once I arrived, they opened the archives. They, shared everything with me. I went back through 1967 on forward through 1969, looking at reports that were there. They were extremely helpful, and so it was kind of strange to me. So I asked them, I kind of probed. I was like, have you had experiences? Do you believe in the topic? Tell me more. What have your experiences been? And what came up again and again from those folks and from the public is that they did not know that there were other sightings, that the things had occurred other than what Tom Reed had, his story. And I don't want to speak for the police department. I can't do that. But what I can say is there are officers. There's one officer in particular that shared a sighting story. And he said, I won't report it. And I said, well, why won't you report it? Do you not believe it? And he said, well, I don't know what it was. He said, I'm sure there's an explanation for it. He described a light coming up from the back of his property. It rose up and then it shot off. And he said it was unusual. I said, why wouldn't you report that? And he said that he didn't want to be part of the Tom Reed show. And so I spoke to another officer, and and that officer explained that the attention that had come to the community it wasn't so much that the attention on the subject was the issue. It was that they felt it had become only about one individual when there appeared to have been many individuals involved. And another officer said he was so shocked to learn about all of these other witnesses because he had just come to understand that it was the one incident. So I think, unfortunately, sometimes having someone overshadow all of these other stories really diminishes the experience. And I will say that many of these individuals believe Tom Reed. They believe that this happened. It's not about belief. It's about making sure that the other witnesses have a voice as well.
Well, here's the thing about that. And I just want to get your opinion that, to me, it's so beneficial to have cooperation with other people. I mean, it just seems like, it's I never understood why, because I mean, it's so much more of an important case the more witnesses you have that
I
will back
actually
you up
think
and
it
validate what you saw.
benefit him if the other witnesses were allowed to speak out without being quieted. I think.
All right.
That,
Well, Tom may watch this, and that's okay. But I do have to say this, that I don't know if I should say it, but he's really tried to diminish other people that had that. I mean,
and I haven't spoken with Tom
he's attacked
directly.
other people who
I've
were
heard
witnesses.
That.
Yeah.
I've heard
or I
that.
should
I've
say at least
spoken
one
with
person. Yeah.
Yes. So, as a researcher, my goal is to look at data. And if you are restricting data in any way, then you're really diminishing the research that can be done and the credibility of the research. So it behooves you to share all of the information, to let people come forward. If anything, it validates the experience. So yeah.
So you're kind of looking from the outside in and, seeing this whole thing. So if you would just give us, your opinion of what you think. Things were, now you went back, you said all the way to 67 and then forward from 69, which this is interesting. Let's hear about it.
So I was really curious because I did interview, what's his name? Sorry, I just drew a blank. The gentleman, Ed Gulata. So he was the son of the former police chief with Sheffield PD at the time of the event. And I was told Ed has an excellent memory. He was wonderful to speak with. He is in the Netflix documentary. And he had reported that his father didn't believe in the reports, but that there had been calls about lights in the sky and lights landing as well. And so when we went back to look at the archives, I wanted to see, are there any reports on the books? There were none. And I did go back, a couple of years. I looked for anything odd or, strange, any kind of report that was unusual. I found nothing. But what I also noted, and speaking with the police, in 1969, when this event occurred, if you called the police about lights in the sky, unless you reported an abduction, the report would not have made it into the books. So, you were making reports about auto theft, police matters, things that, they could follow up on and investigate. So something.
Well, let me ask you, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what about when there's, multiple people calling in? They still wouldn't make a record of that?
So there's a saying with the police, not a police matter, is, that if it's something that, they might go out and look, but if it's not followed up on, if it's not something that they can investigate further, especially if the police chief doesn't believe the reports. I hate to say that, but it's just not something that's going to make it into the books at that time. So I think there were only 10 reports for September of 69. And, they involved more serious, somebody going missing in the woods, a car being stolen or reports of breaking and entering. Something like a report of light in the sky. Again, it's not that they didn't follow up on it. I don't know what they did, but it would not have made it into the books. These are handwritten.
Let me just ask you
reports.
this. What did you just say getting lost in the woods is an example, or was there a report
There were
of that?
two individuals that were reported lost, and I did kind of follow up on that because I was curious about that.
Yeah.
But nothing beyond
It doesn't match up for
No,
the time.
no. And it was I think it was the 3rd of September. It was later.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, so that's still very interesting. But let's talk about, you said all the way back to 67, there were people reporting things. And I know there was a farmer. No, I got that wrong.
No, there were reports. So I spoke with witnesses, but as far as the police department records go, there are no reports.
Oh, okay. Let's hear about the witnesses you spoke with.
So I spoke with one individual who claimed to have been abducted, and he and Tom Reed both were reporting similar sightings in 1967. Tom Reed actually, along with his brother, did report sightings in 67. And this individual, and I don't want to name names, without permission from him, but he described an abduction that occurred maybe 5-10 miles south of Sheffield. And he claims to have seen the craft the same night as Tom Reed on September 1st as well. So his abduction story, though, it was the first time. You have to understand, I don't usually interview people who have been abducted or who claim to have been abducted by otherworldly beings. So it was a very chilling story for me. And I, after getting off the phone, I just sat there for a moment and I thought, I can kind of tell when people are being, untruthful. I'm probably not the best person to determine whether someone reporting a UFO incident is telling the truth or not. But what I can tell you is that just from what I know about people, he experienced something, and it was something that really shook him to the core. And you can tell when somebody's experienced a trauma.
Yes.
And I believe him. I believe that these people had an experience. And just the sheer number of witnesses on that date in particular, it's really hard to deny that something happened and it was something significant.
Well, I'm going to have to ask you more details. Sorry, it's my job. But what were the details? Can you share the details since this person right now is anonymous?
Let me just take a look at my notes. I wasn't expecting this. Let's see. I interviewed him. It was a little while ago.
And did you say this, what year was this? Did this happen? 67?
So the abduction, I don't know if the abduction occurred in 67 or 69 I have some lengthy handwritten notes here. I know he had the 2 sightings, and I'm prepared to respond to that. He did describe the craft was very large, and he estimated 60 feet wide and about 500 feet in the air. So that's.
Did he actually say that he felt like he went into the craft?
Yes, he did say that he feels he was abducted. And he actually issued a warning to me that gave me goosebumps. He said, "Be careful with this topic." And I said, "Oh, is the community unfriendly to this?" Is before I had gone to Sheffield. I said, "Is the community unfriendly toward it?" And he said, "Not the people." It sounds silly saying it, but when you're talking to these individuals, again, it's something has happened to them that has generated fear in some cases. In other cases, it's euphoria. And some, people's reaction to it appears to be very different. In this case, it was a fear response.
Now, I'm going to just change gears a little bit because I'm going to ask you about what you found out, because I've heard Tom Reed stories on why the monument was removed and put in the town garage, and so what did you find out when you researched that?
So people told me that the reason they were Well, and actually, I did ask my partner this specifically. What is your feeling on this? And he reported people weren't against the story. They believed the family. The issue they had with it was how he was treating it, which was, it's all about him. That the memorial is named for him. It's not the UFO park, it's the Tom Reed Park. So I think people had a problem with that. Not so much that the topic was being aired, but that the topic was being dominated by one individual.
I see. So that's what you believe? That's the reason they actually removed the monument?
I heard from multiple individuals in Sheffield that was their beef with it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's hear some of the interesting things that you have uncovered during your research and all this. The location area, and this is something that's also that I ask the question, I guess I don't have any opinion on it, but it is really strange how things happen in a concentrated area sometimes.
Yeah,
it just doesn't even. There's no sense to it, really.
Yeah. So the property that I'm interested in particular is located near Sheffield, very close to Sheffield, and also near the officer with his own sighting. That property has had 3 different reports over the past several decades. And they're credible reports. In one case, the police were called in to investigate something that had occurred, physical evidence. And there is another report that I don't know if it's connected specifically to the UFO sighting, but it correlates with the date of the sighting. This family did report to the UFO Reporting Center. And and the first sighting on their property occurred September 1st, 1969.
Yeah. I don't think there's any, I don't think there's any doubt that something happened on that day. And, one of the things that Tom Reed talked about is the absence of sound. And I've heard that a number of times, and it, like a vacuum, like you're underwater or something. And, that's just, it's hard to understand what that might be. Some speculate it may be like a manipulation of time. Who knows? But still, it's only speculation. But that's such a fascinating part of it.
Well, and I don't know if you want to talk about the sighting that our family had, but
oh, absolutely. Let's. Well, that's inspired you, right? From the.
Well, that was something that we noted with our own sighting. So I got into this topic. My interest in this topic comes from an experience that we had sometime around 2016, 2017. My daughters were reporting, we lived in the Catskill Mountains, and my daughters kept telling me that there was a light outside of their window, that it was over the mountain. And I just said it's probably, a street light or cars or or a plane coming in was my first thought, actually. And they kept, every couple of nights, Mom, it's back, it's back. And one night they said, you've got to come look at this. And I reluctantly got out of bed, and I went to the window and looked out, and there was this bright white light hovering, not great with distance, but, I'd say about 500 feet above the ground on the top of the mountain. And, at first I said, it's probably just lighting on the mountain to, for planes or something. And then all of a sudden it just jolted to the right, and then it went back, and then it kind of went up, and it did not behave like an aircraft, and obviously not a street lamp. But it also was very bright. So I didn't think it could be a drone, though I couldn't rule that out. Mm-hmm. So a couple of nights later, this is kind of a funny story. This is okay. So a couple of nights later, at this point, I'm thinking about UFOs, right? And I'm tucking my son into bed, and I look up, and I'm looking at a different angle of the mountain, and I see 3 lights. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to go take a video of this. We have to capture this. So I run and get my daughter and I say, we're going to go look at this. We're going to go figure out what this is. And so we get in the car and we've got all the windows rolled down and we're kind of cruising up this mountain road. And I realize, oh, I'm such an idiot. Those are streetlights. And so she's got her phone up and she's, videoing the streetlights. And I said, it's okay, honey, you can put your phone down. She puts her phone down and this orb we both describe it the same way, like a ball of Christmas lights just shoots across the sky in front of us. And it was so shocking that I thought I must have imagined it. It can't be real. And I look over at her and she looks at me and we both go, did you see that? And so yeah, but it only occurred when she put her phone down and it made no noise. We had the windows down. It was definitely not a drone. I shouldn't say definitely, it was a sphere clearly, and it didn't make any kind of noise, which told me that it was not powered like a drone would be powered. And it also it was very low to the ground. It was just above our car. And so I have no idea what it was, but it definitely stuck with both of us. And I started listening to your podcast as a result.
Well, that's good. Well, I'm glad. I was thrilled when, you contacted me because I do remember you saying you were more of a researcher and you were interested in this particular story, and your partner is in the area and law enforcement. So, what a great in. And you have done some research in archives as well. Is there anything you can talk about that?
Again, I'm researching. I did go back. I wanted to see if there were reports of lights in 1969 all the way back through 67. I did want to mention, obviously my interest in this came from being with a police officer. And so I looked up, I wanted to just see how many reports from police officers occurred during the flap in 1967 and 1969. And NICAP had reported I think there are nearly 50 reports in there that people can look at and access, very credible witnesses, obviously. So that's one thing I found interesting. The subject that I'm researching in particular is, again, something I'm not prepared to talk about just yet. I did find later police reports that do show that there was an incident reported, and they did report it to the police. It was something that affected them enough that they reported it to the UFO Reporting Center and the local PD. And so I found reports in 1986 and 2013 of something that occurred. So, but what I do want to say is that anyone who says that the police are hiding anything, I'm quite confident now, because I did go into it with that awareness that, maybe somebody is hiding something, maybe pages were torn out. I can tell you right now that as far as Sheffield goes, everything was intact, no signs of torn pages, no signs of missing information. They were very willing to let me go into the archives. They left me alone in the archives. They were very cooperative. So no, there's no cover up.
Well, I don't think anyone has ever talked about the fact that the reports are not, actually, entered into the log if it's not something, if it's like lights in the sky.
Martin, that's in 1969. So if there's a report made today of lights in the sky, that report should be in the log. If the police are called, if dispatches a call, that is logged. So the difference is, the reason that 1969, you just see a handful of reports, is because these are handwritten reports taken over the phone. So if it was something that a clerk dismisses, or the person taking the call maybe dismisses or doesn't think is a police issue, which in this case they did not, they're not going to report it. Now, if Tom Reed's family did go to the police, and I don't know if they did, if they had gone to the police and reported that they were abducted, that certainly would have been something you would see in the report.
I see. Now, are there any reports that you read through that were actually police officers at any given time, that they were the person that experienced this?
The only, so the ground evidence that was looked at by the police, so that the police officers did not see this particular thing, but they were boots on the ground there to investigate the day of this particular incident. The officer I spoke with who did the investigation said that he had no explanation. And I think it was something that baffles him to this day.
And I know we talked offline a little bit. At some point, you will have some names and some, actually, I have seen some of these things, and I don't want to give too much of a teaser, but there's definitely some type of evidence that something happened, but you're just not comfortable with that right now until there's a person, a farm, family that you've been trying to reach. So hopefully you'll get more information and we'll have you back and you can talk freely about it. But I saw the few images and things that are pretty amazing. So, and I hope no one gets mad at me for teasing it out there, but I hope to have you back when you can actually have permission to talk about this. And perhaps we even may be able to have a witness. Is there anything in closing you can think of that is a really interesting, tidbit in all your research that you've done on this?
No, again, I think it's just that in speaking with witnesses, I'm really moved by the fact that something happened, and especially on this particular day in this particular story. I have to say, in speaking with people, I am a believer.
Yeah. Well, I often get asked many times. I was just did a Zoom call the other day with a group about, they wanted me to give the UFO 101 type of thing, in which I did. But I get asked, so do you believe in UFOs? And I think the best answer for that is there's nothing to believe in because they're here and people see them and have seen them forever, but it's what they are. That's the question you should be asking. Do you know what they are?
And really, if you have a sighting, I mean, the best thing you can do is if two individuals have a sighting, like my daughter and I had her document what she saw, I documented what I saw. As a researcher, put the information down, don't speak to each other.
Absolutely.
If you can 100%. Get a photograph, great. If they're eluding your video, that's not good. But if, get the evidence you can. And if you can't get the physical evidence, then at least do the interviewing separately. And, it's really, again, it's not when I say I believe, I'm a believer, I'm saying I believe something happened to these people.
Yes.
I can't tell you what it is, and I won't assume that it's, UAP specifically, but I do think it's important that going into this, you keep an open mind. And again, it's about the data. And in this case, the data supports something really major happened on September 1st, 1969. Right.
And just in closing, I do have to say, a friend of the show, a longtime friend of the show, Klaus Svan in Sweden, he was telling me a story about his wife and him were driving home from a party at night, and they had witnessed a UFO themselves. Now, he's a top researcher in Sweden, and he's on TV all the time, and they take it serious over there. And he said, okay, he told his wife, don't say a word. And they got home and they each went in a separate room and wrote down everything they knew. And boy, that is very good advice. And thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your work. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having me, Martin.
All right. Okay, everyone, we'll be back next week with Noma Slovic. He is actually in the state of Maine, and he wrote a book about UFOs in Maine. I actually read the first one. I haven't read this one, but I will tell you it's very interesting because I grew up in a little tiny town called Elliott, Maine. And, there was a population around 2,000 people when I was growing up. And at the time, I seemed to know everyone, and everyone seems to know everyone's business and all that. But, however, there was a UFO encounter, a pretty major one that happened there that I had never heard of. That is in his book. So I'm going to be talking about that. So anyway, we'll see you here next week. Thank you. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.